Hello, and welcome to our webinar, Partner for Success. This is the 5th episode of our Beyond SASE SCAPE research series. I'm Jonna Till-Johnson, Nemertes CEO and founder, and presenting today is my colleague and friend, John Burke, Nemertes CTO. We encourage you to submit any questions that you might happen to have along the way. We save some time at the end for Q&A, and we love getting questions. So we'll answer as many as we can. So please keep them coming, send them your way, fire them off as soon as you think of them, and that way you can pay full attention to the rest of the webinar. And with that, John, let's go ahead and get started.
Sure thing, Jonna. Let's dive in. No presentation is complete without slides. So here we are with some slides. And for those of you who have not done the drill with us before, been to the rest of the episodes in this series, we'll start by introducing Nemertes, the company, and then the study from which we're drawing the data that we are presenting today. I'll review quickly the success metric that we're using in evaluating how well different vendors' solutions in different spaces are associated with success and security. That also constituted the subject of the first episode in the series. So if you want more detail, that'll be the place to go and get it. And then we will take a look sort of product category by category at who was being used the most in that category and at how well associated with success each vendor in that category for which we got data was. We'll wrap it up with a few recommendations and then jump to that much lauded question and answer period. So please pitch those questions our way. They keep life interesting. Oh, and to answer the most frequently asked question ahead of time so you don't have to ask it, if I was a Jolly Rancher, I would definitely be watermelon flavored. Just want to say. So about Nemertes, we are a research and strategic advisory firm, and we are focused on helping organizations get the most value out of the emerging technologies that they deploy. We do that by doing our own unsponsored primary research in different areas of emerging technologies, and in each study, identifying relevant success metrics and then correlating those success metrics against practices, products, technologies, and vendors, as we'll see in the course of this presentation. So our focus is very much on enterprise use of emerging technologies and what makes that use successful. For the Secure Cloud Access and Policy Enforcement Research Study, we spoke with or surveyed 157 companies. We focused on the US. We got a few Canadian companies in, so that's why we have 2 countries in the study. And they span 31 vertical industries, including subdivisions of financial services among the 31. Overall, the companies are on average medium-large, a little under 6,000 average number of employees and a little under 2 billion average revenues. We have a full spectrum of sizes, whether by employee count or annual revenues or number of sites, and of course can combine that with the industries to slice the data in very interesting ways. So we're going to be talking about which vendors' solutions in different parts of the security landscape are most closely associated with success in securing the enterprise. And that therefore leads us to the question of, what do you mean by successful? So for the SCAPE study, this research project, we have defined success in security as having the minimum number of serious security incidents for every security incident that the company records. So everybody gets exposed to a ton of security incidents every day. There's just automated attacks going on all the time. Our defenses turn them aside automatically and without us having to pay attention to them. What constitutes a serious security incident, and this was part of the research project, see episode 1 of the series, are things that require the enterprise to respond because they affect a large number of employees. They affect the clients or customers of your company, or they affect your ability to do business. They deprive you of access to online catalogs, things like that. So they affect business process or function, they affect employees, or they affect customers. And to a lesser extent, they require companies to report on the incident to some external body. So with those as criteria for serious security incidents, we asked folks how many of those they had versus how many security incidents they were cognizant of in a given time span, and came to an overall median secure incident per security incident, or SIPI, score of 0.13, 13 serious incidents per 100 incidents. The most successful companies are getting 0.02 or better, often much, much, much better, several more zeros before you get to a meaningful digit. And they constitute the success group in this study, and comprised about 21% of participants overall. So when we look at success correlations in this research project, we're looking at two different levels of correlation. One is association with that group of the most successful companies. So how much more likely or less likely are those most successful folks to be using a particular technology, or, as we're going to be talking about today, using a particular vendor. And then secondly, leaving aside the question of whether the company is overall in the success group or not, just looking at folks who are using a technology or a vendor versus folks who are not, what are the median SIPI values for them? And so we're looking for basically higher scores in that differentiation between the success group and everybody else. The success group is more likely to be using the solution. And in the other case, we're looking for lower scores. The users of this technology have a lower SIPI than folks who do not use it. Two measures of success in mind against that same metric. Let's start talking about technologies. First up, endpoint detection and response, the advanced endpoint functionality that's aimed at making the endpoints in your organization part of your security monitoring network, as well as part of the policy enforcement network. We saw in the research that Microsoft Defender was the most broadly deployed solution in the space, and there are plenty of other competitors for whom we got some responses. The number for whom we got enough responses to calculate the success ratio for use by the success group versus everybody else, a smaller subset. And we saw that although Microsoft Defender is more broadly deployed, Cisco AMP for endpoints is a little more differentiated in the space. The success group is significantly more likely to be using it than everybody else. So we just point that out. It's got the bigger correlation with success in this space. Looking beyond EDR to XDR, which is the behavioral analytics component of the environment that's meant to take in data from EDR and other solutions and look through it for evidence of threats, whether that's simply anomalous behavior or known hostile behavior, and flag it, trigger automatic responses, something. Again, Microsoft Defender branded solution, the advanced threat protection features there, leading in deployment in the space with McAfee and Cisco rounding out the top three. But when we look at the success metrics, we see that in this case, Microsoft is also the most successful solution, in that folks in the success group are significantly more likely to be deploying it than folks in the rest of the group. So 102.7% more likely means more than twice as many of them as a percentage than in the everybody else group. I keep forgetting to say all others. Jonna, sorry, I know we keep talking about all others versus everybody else. I'm going to try and stick with all others going forward.
Yes, of course, you can always just say the cool kids for the success group. That works
Sure,
too.
sure. So identity and access management as a service, folks who are providing you with that first gate check, essentially, on people being who they say they are as they try and get into your critical systems, especially your cloud-based solutions. Lots of players in the space, big names like Okta and Ping and OneLogin, big names like Microsoft, Azure Active Directory. We see that, of course, is leading in the space, and no surprise there, with IBM and Google, a little surprisingly, rounding out the top three. And they are also the three for whom we had enough data to calculate the success metrics. And we saw that, surprisingly, although it's one of the lower deployed of the three top deployed solutions, Google came out on top in the success correlation, that the folks in the success group are more than twice as likely to be using Google than than all others. So something to keep in mind as you're making your choices about these things, if you have not made a choice yet, or if you're reconsidering your choice because of any issues you might be having with the technology you're using. Now, CASBs, we saw that Microsoft's far and away leading in terms of deployment in this space, but that, and we only got enough data to evaluate success correlations for them, so they don't get their own separate slide just for that. A table with one row is not interesting. So summarizing the result, it correlates somewhat negatively with success, in that the success group is a little under 10% less likely to be using that solution than one of the other ones in the space. Secure web gateways as a service. Secure web gateways are there to protect folks inside your security zone from web things outside your security zone. So not necessarily from your SaaS providers, but from random website that they're hitting. Meant to filter out malware, meant to block access to known bad sites, and meant to be flagging anomalous behaviors and potentially quarantining sites as they behave differently from expectations. We see there that AT&T and Cisco and ForcePoint are leading the field in terms of breadth of deployment of secure web gateways as a service, and that it is ForcePoint that comes out ahead in terms of success correlation. The success group is more than twice as likely to be deploying a ForcePoint secure web gateway as they are to be, as is everybody else. And I did it again. More than twice as likely as all others to be deploying the ForcePoint solution. So, SASE solutions. Now here we're looking at solutions that are specifically marketed as SASE solutions, and that folks bought as SASE solutions. And so there is some overlap in the vendor space with other things like the CASBs or the secure web gateways, and sometimes even with the same product, which is sold separately or as a part of a SASE portfolio. With that in mind, we saw that Cisco's Umbrella solution was most broadly deployed at the moment, with Symantec, aka Broadcom's, second, and Cato Networks coming in third, with a significant distance between them and Symantec and Cisco, but still Cato, and tying with them Palo Alto in terms of deployment. Looking at those top four, in terms of success, we saw that it was the Broadcom Symantec solution that was most highly correlated with success, with folks in the success group, again, more than twice as likely as all others to be deploying that solution. Cato Networks coming out with a positive correlation there as well, although lower down, still in the positive range. And then both Cisco and Palo Alto currently inversely correlated with success. The success group less likely to be deploying their SASE solutions specifically. Maybe using them for something else, but less likely to be using their SASE solutions per se. Software-defined perimeter, or pure zero trust network access solutions, are fascinating and rapidly becoming of much broader enterprise interest as they seek to cut through the Gordian knot that a lot of companies have before them of managing access for both on-premise and off-premise access to both on-premise and off-premise resources consistently. No seams between the policies, no seams between the enforcement mechanisms. So that's kind of the problem SDP was designed for. And we see that the Symantec Broadcom solution in that space and the Cloudflare solution are the most broadly deployed, with Appgate and Banyan tied for the third place slot there. And looking at the success data, we really only had enough for the top two. So looking at those, both positively correlated with success in the sense of decreasing SIPI for everybody, but Cloudflare more strongly associated with use by that success group. Again, more than twice as likely to be using it than all others. So that's been a fairly whirlwind tour, but the data is pretty straightforward. And if you're interested in the details on technology use and security practices and their impact on the SIPI, you can take a look at episode 3 in this series. If you're interested in zero trust, we brought up zero trust network access. That's episode 4. By all means, do take a look at the other episodes in the series. Coming out of this, we have several recommendations to folks. One, looking at that table up front and the correlation between use of specific technologies and success. Select technologies, if you haven't already, that can have the greatest impact on your security success and get them deployed in your environment. And evaluate many options, but give some extra attention to the vendors who are associated with security success. Looking at the rest of the deck. Measure your SIPI, measure the number of serious security incidents that you're having relative to the number of incidents that you're detecting overall. And as you make new deployments, either new technologies or new vendors for an existing technology, compare the SIPIs that you had before and the SIPIs that you've gotten after to help assess whether the rollout of that new technology or new vendor has pushed you ahead in your security success, because that's what every effort that you're making in the space should be doing. And with that, I will hand it back over to Jonna. And the question and answer session. Oh, Jonna, you're muted, sorry.
Wow, and I thought you were just listening to me there, because I was saying, please feel free to put the slides away so people can look at our smiling faces. But with that, before we head into our Q&A period, I wish to draw your attention to the links in your attachment tab, which aren't super exciting today, as we have come to the end of our series. But you will see how to find us on LinkedIn. And by the way, please do search us out on LinkedIn. We read and respond on a regular basis, and also links to our website, which is always also a great way to reach us. So some of the questions that have come in, John, quite a number of them actually. Should I only work with the vendors that are tagged as successful here?
No. Your mileage may vary. Your context definitely varies. And the data that we have are not the be-all and end-all in this space. They're just something to take into account as you make these decisions. And certainly there are a lot of other factors to consider in that decision, including existing relationships and the ecosystem you're building in your environment. We have seen in our research consistently that an ecosystem approach to building your security portfolio gives you the most success at the high level in security. And so you got to take all these things into account. This is just another good data point to keep in mind.
Well, speaking of ecosystem, we actually had a question come in that said, hey, if I just go out and buy the best vendor in each category, am I not going to end up with an explosion of vendors? Now, I get that your goal is to have an ecosystem of vendors, which I guess is some subset of vendors, but maybe you can expand a little bit on how what the ecosystem means and how it's different from best in breed.
Sure. And best in breed is, as you say, just going out and getting the thing that looks like it's the best in any given category. An ecosystem approach takes into account the quality of the solution. It's got to meet your requirements, but also takes into account how well that solution is engineered to work with other solutions, either in your space or that you're considering. And that's not just, oh, of course, we're compatible with X, Y, Z, and Q, or we adhere to this standard, but do they have lots of reference clients who are deploying both of those tools? Do they have specific integrations for those tools, as well as generic standards-based integrations? And when you try them out together, do they manage smoothly together? Do they trigger each other smoothly together? Whatever the relationship is supposed to be, it should be seamless, it should be smooth, it should be reliable, and it should be stable.
And that kind of segues into yet another question that we had. And this question actually zeroes in on Microsoft, but I am going to expand on the questioner's intent to some of the other vendors to whom it applies. This question here is: Microsoft Defender EDR negatively correlates with success, but XDR positively correlates. And the questioner asks, why do you think that is? And how should we users act on this information? And I, Jana, will add to that. Across the board, where you have vendors who may not be the most successful in all categories, should you just buy from a particular vendor under the assumption that the integration will be easier and therefore you're closer to your ecosystem ideal? And if not, you do. But I think we should answer the questioner's comment about EDR and XDR. Why is one positive and one negative?
Okay. Taking that specifically, EDR is far more broadly deployed than XDR. It's got a bigger footprint in the enterprise and is more likely to be used by both successful and unsuccessful companies by this success metric in question. XDR is both more advanced and newer, and a tool that more sophisticated security shops will have gotten to earlier than less sophisticated security shops. And so with the, I hope not unreasonable assumption that more sophisticated security shops are also likely to be more successful security shops, I think you can get to the point where XDR is more likely to be used by that security success group, and EDR not so much because it's so broadly deployed.
Yeah, and that aligns with the data that we saw, which was it was only a couple percentage points negative correlation, which is usually the case when something is table stakes. But more broadly, should companies be reaching out to a handful of key vendors, such as Microsoft or such as anyone else on this, and just assume that, you know, hey, we work with Netscope, so their variant of CASB or whatever is going to be better than, you know, if they do all the functions, I'd rather get all the functions from the same vendor? Or is there a downside to that?
Oh, there's definitely a downside to that.
Okay.
And we've seen this consistently. I mean, honestly, it's not a news story in the security space with the advent of SASE as a marketing term. But SASE has certainly thrown it sharply into highlight again. And that is vendors may have a complete portfolio of products that address what you perceive as the security space for you. But that doesn't mean that they're smoothly integrated with each other, either on the front end for management purposes or on the back end for sharing data, consuming policy consistently, any of that stuff. And SASE has, you know, seen the same kind of thing happen as has happened so many times in the past. Bigger companies buy smaller companies, fill out the portfolio, throw it under an umbrella, sell it to you as a single thing, but under the covers, it still works like separate products. And so it's great when somebody's got everything, but not, it's necessary, but not sufficient. If you want to have a very small vendor pool, that the vendor pool include vendors with broad portfolios. But yeah, somebody who's just bought a bunch of solutions and hasn't finished gluing them together on the back end, let alone the front end, is not comparable to somebody who's been a fully integrated solution in the space for a long time already.
So yeah, I'm glad you highlighted that, because that's something we find ourselves telling clients a lot. Last question that's come in. I think they're just tweaking us here, John. But if we use all the successful vendors on your list, the ones that correlated with success, does that guarantee success?
Absolutely not. Yep. Having a paint set does not make you Picasso. So you still need to put the work in to deploy it and use it properly.
Okay. Well, that looks like all the questions we have for now. So thanks, John, and thanks to all of you for your time and great questions. The replay should be up on our channel shortly. If you find it valuable, please feel free to share it with your colleagues and take a moment to rate this webinar. It's much appreciated. If you haven't already, check out those links in our attachments tab. Thanks for joining us today, and we look forward to having you with us again soon. Thank you.
Thanks all.